the University of Turin, and he's joining us live from the Italian capital, Rome. Thank you for your time. So as Israel considers its options, the US, the EU are trying to impose more sanctions on Iran. Why do you think that that is what they're considering when Iran's attack was a response to the deadly Israeli bombing of its consulate in Damascus?
Indeed, the U.S. Treasury Secretary just asked to introduce new sanctions on Iran and also other actors. This happened in the frame of the spring conference, the International Monetary Fund, which has recently increased the loan program to the regime of Sisi in Egypt, a regime which is well known for massive violation of human rights and much more. So this tells us something. Iran has a quite solid economy and is already subject to over 4,000 direct and indirect sanctions, and was able nonetheless to shape a hybrid force in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. So this means that new sanctions won't make any difference. But what is remarkable is the unbalanced, also I would say biased logic of calling for new sanctions. It's that U.S. rules-based order, as often is framed, is only for adversaries. When Israel attacked the Iranian consulate that you just mentioned in Damascus last April the 1st, none of Western countries condemned the attack or endorsed the intervention by the United Nations. On the other hand, when Iran threatened and then carried out a retaliation that was well pre-planned, it was well known, Western countries were intervening quite promptly, and they were also asking for UN intervention.
And how has Israel managed to do that? You know, it bombed another country's consulate and then managed to get the Western world on its side because that country responded to the deadly attack on its consulate.
Yes, let me make a parallelism with nuclear weapons. The only country that have used so far weapons against civilians, the United States, and the only state so far equipped with nuclear weapons in the Middle East, that is Israel, have long warned us, still today are doing so, how dangerous and immoral is the fact that Iran can acquire nuclear weapons. Both Iranian and Israeli authorities have repeatedly threatened to wipe, let's say, their respective countries from the face of the earth, this common center. So this is not a criterion for legitimizing the possession of nuclear weapons. So this issue of nuclear weapons tells precisely that. Of course, these double standards that are there because this, let's say, regional order is led by these powers. But you are noticing, of course, that this global and regional order is changing also through the war in Ukraine we're witnessing. So the balance of power is changing. And so these powers in the coming years, but already today, need to take into account the changing balance that we are discussing here.
Well, they certainly don't seem to be taking that into account now. As you said, the EU foreign ministers are meeting today to discuss more sanctions on Iran. The US is already doing it. If we go back to Israel and the war on Gaza, though, what, if anything, does the expansion of this front against Iran mean for Israel's war on Gaza?
First of all, actually, they are taking into account that despite their attempt to go in another direction, actually, they are obliged to do so. And we see that the asymmetrical war, that's largely thanks to Iran, we are witnessing is far from being one-sided and clear picture. So Iran, for instance, is able to make many damages to this order that this Western country are shaping in the region. Then I want to say also that certainly we might ask how we come out of all of that, and certainly the international community needs to do something. So we are speaking about balance of power, and the United Nations, we see that this is quite visible, and in this sense, it's a positive fact that the Israeli authorities are starting to consider the United Nations decisions and somehow as needed and useful. They were calling for an intervention by the United Nations. So this is positive. It's positive because somehow we see that more and more persons are starting maybe to think that there is no military solution for a political problem. Of course, this is a process, it will take time, but let's say that we are ending up in that direction.
Mr. Kamel, just lastly and very briefly, because we're running out of time, but when you say the international community needs to do something, what do you mean by the international community? Because as you've said yourself, it's very divided.
Yes, I think that as you noticed, the International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice, the Security Council, so we are witnessing a number of dynamics that to a certain extent were quite unthinkable until a few years ago. And also this is important also from a domestic perspective, you think, within Israel, because if we are able to show that there are a number of factors, including Israel, that are asking maybe then more and more persons will understand that a ceasefire is needed and a permanent war with Palestinians somehow won't succeed, and that there is only one possibility to solve that, meaning to live safely through to find a political compromise that respects Palestinian rights. As I said, this is something that is very visible for anyone willing to see. I think that the balance of power are changing, and at the international level, this is also mirrored at the United Nations nowadays.
Lorenzo Kamel, thank you so